Welcome to the 100th episode of Silver Lining for Learning. It's shocking, actually. We have done this without really any external support. Just a bunch of people got together and to do this, and we are very proud what we have accomplished. And so today is a very special episode, an episode of celebration and reflection. We have invited our regular viewers to be on the stage with us and to chat about their experiences, their reflections, and possible suggestions for what we might do. But before any of that happen, that will be emceed by Punya Mishra. But before that happened, we have brought back one of our original instigators of the show. That's Shuangye Chen, Dr. Shuangye Chen, professor from East China Normal University. There are many reasons we bring her back, but one of the things we want her to start sharing, maybe about 3 to 5 minutes, is the kind of ironical resurgence of the disease of COVID, when everybody is thinking the COVID is gone, but it's back. And nobody really was predicting Shanghai would be in lockdown, when we did the show, Wuhan was in lockdown. So Shuangye, would you share with us, now you are in the midst of a lockdown, and we read a lot of news, but I trust the personal experiences. And so what's happening in Shanghai, what's happening to the schools, and what's happening actually in China with COVID? Shuangye, please, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yong. Thank you all, and I missed you, and I'm sorry that I just joined this 100th episode celebration and reflection. And I think before I was invited 2 weeks ago by Yong, no one would expect that Shanghai would be the gigantic city for lockdown in China and in the world. And we are very surprised, but I think this kind of more or less is kind of doomed to arrange me to show up again in this kind of 100th episode of a Silver Lining for Learning. Just as you mentioned, when we started, that is Wuhan was locked down, and then other countries, cities, and consequently, we will see this kind of a chain of consequence from this pandemic to the society. And now it's just played around the world, around the globe, and from Hong Kong to Shenzhen, and then to Shanghai. And I think that Hong Kong didn't lock down for various reasons. Shenzhen is almost locked down, but finally, this is a very unexpected decision that is to all the citizens, and also I think in Shanghai and also in China, that is this is a large city was locked down finally, and we are in the middle of the lockdown now. I think this really in the middle of this kind of a 5-day lockdown. I'm lived in the west of the river, the Pudong, the Pujiang River, and I think there's still 2 more days to wait. And we got one test on the first day, and originally it planned to take the second test today. The test cover all, every residence, but we got notice that it canceled for today's test. So we are still waiting for the news and kind of new arrangements to be released. I think that life here, I think is still paced in our home, in our family. And I think almost every family has already got a package of vegetables and food from as a kind of a gift from the government. So although before the news of lockdown was released, there was kind of a chaotic. People are hurried into buying various vegetables and food. But it turned out the order is good. But I think that there is still we are seeing some kind of a new signals emerging. How would this, this kind of lockdown will be directed into? Because actually, before the lockdown, the schools and universities, the education sector, I think this is the most sensitive sector in the pandemic. That means the school has already been moved to be online, and also universities are totally locked down 3 weeks ago. So currently, all the universities in Shanghai and the students, and they are still being quarantined in the university, and part of them are being quarantined in their dormitory. So you can imagine this kind of uneasy youth energy being locked down in a kind of a tiny room with 4 or 5 students, and they don't know when they can be released. Yeah, but on the other side, the universities has a very large pressure, because they have to use a very limited manpower. The university totally locked down. We cannot get into, and only just a very small selected people, mostly our leaders, they get into the university. They take the volunteer, and then they have to deliver the food, send the food to the students for 3 meals. Yeah, on time, timely, send them. But for the schools, I think this is kind of a lessons we learned from last time, 2 years ago. And almost in 2 days, the virtual school was successfully set up. And the university, but not the university, the schools, just take my boys' case. Then they have a more reasonable timetable on the virtual school. So they will not have a very tight scheduling. And they will have a kind of like a 20 minutes as a kind of a centralized provision from this kind of a virtual platform. And then they have another 20 minutes from their own teachers to have this synchronized lecturing and tutoring and interaction. And then they will have some exercises and homework, but they were required to submit by themselves. So it has already been done for 3 weeks. I think that the general public, the society, have a very high degree of acceptance. But I think from actually just in the past 2 years, I also have 2 manuscripts almost ready. One is being sent for review, another is in the final part. This is a concern. They have been stemmed from the 2 phenomenon. One is from higher education, another from the basic education. From higher education, that is, we noticed during these 2 years, like Tsinghua University, we have a very gigantic innovator in our higher education. This was being driven and also benefit from this pandemic, the COVID-19, how they reacted, how they responded, and how they initiate their larger scale innovation from their response and reaction to the COVID-19 has already generated a very large impact and even lead our the whole country's higher education innovation and also the digitalization of education. Our recent Ministry of Education, this kind of the head, the minister of our education, it is just to have a very large plan for that. Another one is that I can see a kind of invisible labor and also a kind of a digital labor generated from this kind of this is an online massive online education. That is because I'm a kind of mother and I can see how this digitalization could put a further requirement and taxing requirements on mothers at home in this kind of a limited space, the physical space and also the space online. Yeah, this is what I would like to share.
Thank you, Punya. That's very nice update. I just let everybody know how big Shanghai is. It is the size of Australia and Canada, just in terms of population. It's amazing. It's shocking. So now I'm going to turn us forward into Punya. We have invited the guests, and did you want to get started, Punya, please?
Sure. Thank you, Zhao and Shanghai. All the best through this time that you're going through, and hopefully everybody comes out safe and fine. And thank you for that update. So yes, we have a few guests with us today, and really excited to have all of you there. Priyank is already saying that he's nostalgic about the YouTube chat, which he's missing. But these are people who have been very regular, visitors on the YouTube channel. It's a pleasure to see all of you put faces to names, because we never, got to see many of you. So I'm just going to, because we have quite a few people and of course we have limited time, I'm going to just put a few prompts out there and then just go round robin, sort of ask you to talk about that. So one is, give us a brief 1-2 sentence introduction to who you are, but follow that with why did you stick with SLL? Why, I'm not sure that you watched all 100, but you were pretty regular on it because we saw your names regularly and we chatted with you. So what was it that sort of made you, what has Silver Lining for Learning meant to you? Because I know what it has meant to us. For us, it has been, I used to call it a passion project, but I realized, no, it's actually a curiosity project. Is that we wanted to learn as educators, as faculty members, as researchers, like what's happening. And that's been very enriching for us personally. But we'd love to hear from you what it has meant for you, and any single episode or something that really stands out in your mind, or something that as a whole, these pieces add together to something bigger than what one episode could be, right? So Bob, since you were the first one to join us on the channel, I'm going to start with you. So again, quickly, short intro, why stick with SLL, why you have stuck with it, and what stands out overall or individual episode-wise?
Well, you can tell by looking at me that I'm old, but I'm interested because you represent the thought leaders in the future of learning, and to be able to learn from you and to be able to interact with you, for me, is a special opportunity. My background is K-12 education from the operational side, and I worked 35 years in the Milwaukee Public Schools doing just about everything there was to do. My thoughts for your group to think about would be, number one, that in the K-12 arena, leadership changes too fast. We have average of 2.5 years with superintendents in large school districts. And the turnover on school boards with 2-year election cycles. Everybody has to put their stake in the ground when they come in. And so what we have to do at the operational side is bring them up to speed so that we don't have to pretend like we're starting over again. And that's where you all can help, because what I was able to do, and working with Chris in particular, a couple of others, was to be able to build partnerships with higher ed and with businesses. And those partnerships with higher ed and businesses with our K-12 district helped us bridge some of this change in leadership And the other thing that I've been asking for years and still waiting to see is a digital transcript, a transcript that allows people to have learning certifications from various locations. That's going to be necessary in order to accomplish what you all are talking about. But thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you, Robert. And I think the point that you make about this leadership change, I think one of the things that we've talked a lot about is that unless we change the sort of fundamental systems within which these function, those will outlive the individuals who come and go. And I think that part of the reason why educational change is hard is because the systems have become so entrenched that it's difficult to move those forward. I'm going to move on to Lydia. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and what SLL has meant.
Great. Thank you for the invitation. I'm Lydia. I am a PhD student from the University of Cambridge in England, also a visiting fellow at Harvard Graduate School of Education. I really enjoyed the Silver Lining for Learning show. I started watching. I remember it is a nice full cycle. I remember watching the first episode in my first year PhD in the dormitory. Now I'm like in my final year writing up, and it's now I'm back in England. It's really nice full cycle. What I really enjoy about Silver Lining for Learning that I think is different from other shows or talks or seminars is this kind of dialogue and conversation based style that each time I watch, I feel I'm engaged in a conversation with the host as well as the guests. I don't feel like I was being presented something to listen to, but rather I was thinking with everyone. And so that's something that's really special for me.
Thank you, Lydia. On to you. I don't know how you like to pronounce yourself. Name Duncan, Nin, or is it Danty? How do you go by?
Yeah, it's Danching, and I use my English name Danty.
That's right, because that's what I know from YouTube, right?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Danching Yin. I'm a PhD student in education leadership and policy studies. I learned so much from you for 2 years, and I think it's Silver Lining for Learning changed my life in 2 ways. So on the one hand, I would say my black and white life during the pandemic was actually colored by this program. And you made many of my Saturday afternoons nourished intellectually. And serendipity also happened during the show. And I ran into one of the earlier hosts, Professor Scott, when I attended UCEA last year in Columbus, Ohio. And he obviously he didn't know me until I mentioned Silver Lining for Learning. So I also don't know if he sent out our selfie to you. He said he would, but I do wish that all of you were there as well. And on the other hand, as for the content and knowledge that our speakers and guest speakers and you shared, I learned so many things. I know that the program kind of covered many interesting topics and themes. I learned the most from episodes that featured students. I remember your episode 15 and 29 especially invited some of the students all over the world to share their experience during the pandemic, also share what they were doing. So that was amazing for me to know young people can really achieve a lot. And I also learned a lot from education leaders that featured in your program, including the deans, including superintendents, school principals, teachers, and leading researchers. Besides, I also learned a lot from your self-reflections, and by knowing that you are so like humbling, reflecting, and learning and trying to improving this show and passionately kind of preparing for future shows, also makes it a true honor for me to be here today. So, and I think that's all, and I will definitely look forward to learning more. Thanks.
All right. So on to Priyank next. I think you were started right very early on with the shows. And we did one episode, like a side conversation as well at one point. So go ahead, Priyank.
Hey, everyone. Thank you, Punya. Yeah, I think, honestly, this has been a wonderful journey. And for me, particularly, I think I came back to SSL again and again, only to have these conversations. I think there's so much of learning here. Having speakers from around the globe come and speak about what is happening in their space, to be able to learn beyond boundaries. I think SLL is a wonderful resource. So I think for me, it was these conversations which kept pushing me to come back even at 3 o'clock in the morning and be a part of these conversations. And I really enjoyed being part of SLL. I can't thank enough to these conversations, these YouTube chats specifically, the kind of conversation we have, side conversation in the chats, I think I enjoyed them a lot. Yeah.
I remember there were some episodes where those chats were like just flowing, with comments and
Right.
people, this parallel conversation, which we would try to somehow insert into our conversation, but it would be next to impossible because there was so much happening. So
yeah, we used to really have, another conversation, kind of another session in chats, particularly.
That's right. All right, on to I think John from Ireland, I'm guessing, in Ireland right now, and we can talk cricket some other time, but or here.
Thanks for that. I hope you had a good St. Patrick's Day in DC. I'm John Heffernan. I'm working basically as a technology enhanced learning coordinator in the equivalent of what we'd have in Ireland as a school district in the US. And 2 fast years. My local library used to have a kind of poster saying, the more I read, the more I realize how little I know. And I think it's been the same here with these conversations kind of on a weekly basis, where you just get new topics that you would never really think about, like, and points of views from people you'd never come across. Like to be honest, actually, my Twitter PLN has kind of grown quite a bit since I've started attending these kind of Saturday evening, like in Ireland at the moment, it's 10:30, or like it's coming up to 10 to 11. So this is kind of pub time usually for me in Ireland. So if the lockdown didn't happen, I'd be in the pub more frequently, and I would have missed out on this. But and like I have said it before, like the four wise, like all you're missing is kind of a table of pints in front of you in a bar somewhere, and that's really, to me, what these conversations are like. But again, it's just the global reach of this network, even though it's been quite small, and there's been times there where there's like 3 or 4 people, and like especially you did one episode as a capstone for the CESI conference, which is the Computers in Education Society of Ireland, which I was involved organising. And a funny story, just kind of as tangent on that, I was talking to my former boss, who works for a government agency, and he says, "Are you still involved with CESI?" And I said, "Well, not really anymore." He says, "The amazing keynotes that they had at the conference, like, how did they get them?" And I just didn't say anything. I just said, "Oh yeah, they must have some great power." But like, it's just even the flexibility of you guys being able to do that for us, like, was really fantastic. And I actually thought that we'd have a big bump after that, and it didn't happen. I was really kind of annoyed that this conversation requires a bigger audience, and I don't know whether it's the case of just the time in different countries doesn't suit people, but it has been a great experience. And like, I tend to listen to more of the conversations on YouTube now because I'm in the gym or whatever. It has been the result of one fall on a treadmill. I won't deny that. So I've gone through pain for these conversations. But yeah, it's just a pity that we can't get a wider audience, because I do think some of the nuggets of knowledge that's being shared here has just been phenomenal. But again, like as I said before, the biggest thing has been the broad, global, diverse topics that you guys have covered. Because like my thing is ed tech, and it's kind of forced me out of my comfort zone to kind of look at sustainability and look at schools in India or China, whatever. It's a good shaking up of the kind of way I think about stuff. So thanks for that, guys, and I'll pass the mic over to somebody else.
Thank you, John, and apologies for that. I think one of the things that I wish we had done originally was that every time we created an episode on YouTube that we took the audio and pumped it out through a podcast. And we are actually looking now to see if we can get some support for somebody to go back and do that, because then you can at least listen to it and not fall off the treadmill or whatever you were doing. So apologies for that. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Dodzi, Amemado, if I'm getting that right. Please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what SLL, has meant to you.
Thank you, Punya. You got it right. That's the right way to pronounce my name. So I'm in Canada. I'm based in Canada. I have a PhD in education with focus on integration of technologies in higher education, which I completed at the University of Montreal. But I'm in Ottawa, where I work with the federal government or the government of Canada in departments, among others, in the Department of the Prime Minister, the Privy Council Office, which is the Department of the Prime Minister of Canada. But I'm still involved in academic research. And 3 years ago, I was at Boston College to undertake a research on drivers, trends, and challenges for the integration of technologies in higher education around the world. So including universities from Australia, Latin America, US, Canada, Europe, Africa, Asia, namely India and China, Russia as well. So yes, I have been invited to this by Kurt, a good friend of mine, with whom I met first in 2014 in Tampere at a conference, AACE conference in Tampere, Finland, in 2014. And since that time, we kept in contact. So about silver lining for learning, how one cannot like silver lining for learning. It's just obvious. At silver lining of learning, you have that opportunity to interact, to reflect on innovative topics. One, you have the opportunity to meet people, experts in their different areas. And you have also the opportunity to meet places. And when I say places, yes, in innovation is Nepal, for instance. You have people talking about that, but also people coming from Silicon Valley to talk about the metaverse, for instance, learning in the metaverse, for instance. And from people coming from organizations such as UNESCO, for instance. So it's so planetary, it's so diverse, it's so rich, topic-wise. So as Chris said one day, I think it was in the 89th episode, he was saying that silver lining of learning is about celebrating innovation, but not only that, but also to see them as models and to try to think how we could adapt this model and implement them elsewhere. I like that definition about the purpose of silver lining of learning. So I think I'm taking too much time. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dodzi. And now that we are in Canada, on to Gerald. And Gerald, I got to know you through this show and ended up interviewing you for my podcast. So that was a connection that happened because of silver lining. And I think Zhao had invited you, I think. And that's how we got to know each other. So go ahead, Gerald.
Thank you very much. Hopefully won't repeat too much here. I am situated in the Comox Valley on Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada. So right out on the west coast there. And yeah, Young's to blame for me being involved in watching. I came to this, couple of things brought me to this. Number one, I'd been a longtime fan of Young's work and Chris's work. So when I saw they were working together. And before I get any further, I really do want to thank the 6 of you that got this going and were able to maintain it and keep it going. One of the things that I definitely benefited from is being able to pinch into your networks, right? You'd bring people on that I would never have had access to or ideas from, things like that, and then have the conversations in a really meaningful way. The other thing that brought me to it is the idea of the concept of not wasting a good crisis. I've been 25 years in public education. I got into it because I believe in public education, but I don't believe we're doing a good job. So I've spent my entire career trying to find opportunities to change. And I agree with Robert. The amount of leadership turnover absolutely is a factor. Sustainable change is one of the things I've been looking for answers for. What kept me coming back is every episode that I watched, I got 2 or 3 ideas that I could then play with that next week or the next month or whatever. And every episode shifted or gave me something to think about and to wrestle with and really opened up a lot of thinking. We get very caught in our own contexts. And quite frankly, especially going through the pandemic and that, it was really healthy to see beyond my own context, to see beyond what was happening here and recognizing that a lot of what we were dealing with was international. I mean, a testament to the reach you've got is the diversity of people that are in this conversation right now and where they're from. And so when I'm able to then go back to whether it's my school or my district and say, hey, look, the dysregulation of kids is international. The dysregulation of kids coming back to schools and how we're working with them in mental health. And a lot of that, the ideas came from here, and then I could take those and run with them, maybe contact the people you had on the show. So those were some of the, as we're going through, so those were some of the key things for me. And again, I really do appreciate that you created this platform and maintained it.
Thank you, Gerald. So I think now that we have gone through one cycle of hearing from all our guests, I'm going to open it up to Chris and Kurt in that order. If you have any comments or questions for the guests, and I think then we will go back to the guests. If you have any questions for us, if you have suggestions for the future, we would love to hear those. But first, Chris, any thoughts, questions, comments?
Well, thanks to all of you for coming, and thanks to all of you for persisting with us. We benefit greatly by having an external lens on what we're doing internally. When I think about what's come through for me in terms of the whole being more than the sum of the parts, a lot of what we've celebrated has been the extraordinary caring about learners that our experts and our guests have had, that they have basically said, this is a really hard time. These students are being robbed of the opportunity to learn because of the circumstances that we're all in. And we are not going to accept that. We are going to make sure that those students learn no matter what. And that's in sharp contrast, unfortunately, to many stakeholders in education who have said, uh-oh, can't do it. Poor kids, we'll just try to get back to normal so we can help you again. So the courage and the commitment of those people is a model. It's a model for all of us. And it also models for kids who are inheriting a very difficult world, resilience and initiative and commitment that I think may be one of the most important things that education can give them. Another thing that I see in the episodes is that it's exposed a lot of the weaknesses in the current educational system. So many things have gone awry that wouldn't have to have gone awry if people had had the attitudes that I just highlighted. And so there's all these deficit models bedeviling education across the world. Well, I don't have enough money, so I can't do anything. Well, look at the incredible stories that we've been highlighting of people who've had almost nothing and have done wonderful things with that. I don't have fancy technology. Well, a feature phone can be fancy technology compared to where we were in the field 10, 15 years ago. So it's really great and important that, again, our episodes have modeled people doing things with technology. Hold on a second. I'm trying to broadcast a program here. Alec, I'm on the computer trying to broadcast a program. Sorry, the joys of family life. And you know, deficit models of the students. Well, you know, will help the privileged students, but the marginalized students, it's just too hard. They don't have enough supports. We'll have to hope that we can recover from the losses they've experienced. So there's also been, unfortunately, some modeling of very deficit-based weaknesses in our current attitudes towards education, and I hope that we can move beyond those. But one of the things that I use for reflection is the "I used to think, but now I think" prompt that came out of Project Zero at Harvard. And we can talk about this more next week when we look to the future, but I think that many of us thought when the pandemic started that it would be a relatively short-term thing, and then we'd go back to where we were before. And the hope was that we'd keep some of what we had innovated with. And then there was a stage where we said, well, we're not going to go back to where we were before, but we're going to go back to a new normal. And it'll be different in some ways for what we had before. And we can use those differences to reinforce learning the lessons of the crisis. But now I think that we've gone through a sea change, and that we're not in Kansas anymore, and it doesn't make much sense to compare Oz to Kansas. It's just really different, and that we need to acknowledge that and dismiss the people that want to magically go back to the world pre-pandemic, including Harvard, incidentally, and say, you know, it's different now, it's a sea change, we need to reinvent and transform. So it's been a very exciting period to live through, and I think that for me, one of the things that has countered the kind of despair that you feel when you watch the news and you listen and watch how some institutions are reacting to things is the extraordinary hope and joy that you find in these wonderful stories of success. Kurt, I'm going to toss it to you.
I'm going to be brief. I'm really going to open it back up to the audience here, but I want to make a comment first and then two questions for the audience. As all of you know, we started 2 years ago on March 21st, 2020. And I think it was after the show or maybe before the show, I went running in Portland at my son's house, and I've been running every day since. So it's been 743 days since we started the show. And you know, when you run that long, you start running out of songs to play. And so for a whole month, or 2 months, I was listening to the Who's greatest hits, and one of the albums in there was called Who's Next. Right now it's ELO I've been listening to for 2 months. But anyways, Who's Next is the theme of the show. We have a schedule, and we're looking at the holes in the schedule, and all of a sudden those holes are filled in. And what's really, Chris commented on this maybe about 9 months into the show. He made a comment on, he didn't think we'd have, after 6 months, who we're going to invite. And then, right, Chris, you were saying, so, then all of a sudden all these people were rolling in. He hadn't realized that we're doing researches around the world, or innovative education, or new models from Italy or Argentina or wherever. And, this happens to us every once in a while. We look at the schedule and we say, who's next? And then all of a sudden it fills in. And with help from all of you, we can continue to work on year 3 and where we're going to go in the next episodes. And so what I like to do, first of all, if anyone has a suggestion on a grant that we could write so that we could join John in Ireland at a pub and have a beer and talk about this all face to face, that'd be great. Okay. And Robert's from Milwaukee. He knows a good beer or two when he sees one. But my 2 questions are, do you have any advice on media exposure for Silver Lining for Learning? What would you recommend, especially the young people here, Lydia and Danching, and Priyank? Where do people hang out in the media news? What should we be attending to, and how can we get access and market ourselves better? That's one question. And the other question is, what themes or topics might we talk about in year 3 of the program? We're trying to get a little more thematic, and we're trying to get some Ukraine shows. I've been unsuccessful in 2 approaches so far, but we're still trying. Young's trying in that regard. If anybody has a recommendation there of an educator who's connected in doing teaching or research in Ukraine, that would be great for a recommendation. But any other recommendations for themes, topics, or media exposure? And I'm just going to be quiet and open up to anyone who'd like to jump in. I see Danching nodding her head, and Lydia's nodding her head, so maybe you want to go first.
Sure, I'm glad to do that. So I agree that with what Professor Chris just said. The pandemic did rob our students and learners in some way. However, I disagree, because outside of formal learning, people also learn. I learn a lot by just watching this show, and also a lot of other shows on different platforms. So one platform I might recommend is the TikTok. And I know one of my friends who is a school teacher in New York City. She actually grew up in China, but she has been a teacher in the US for 6 years. And she started kind of posting her videos on TikTok and on Redbook, on Little Red Book, which is a social media platform as well. And she posted what she learned during teaching, and how she interacted with students and parents in her schools, and all kind of fun things around her. And she got more than 4 million fans online. So I think I watched all of them recently, and I think it's really, really fun, and how she did that as a school teacher. So I guess maybe we can look for some of the influencers who are teachers or students or educators that broadcast their life and make those short videos or ideas delivered to young people on those websites. So I would be glad to help you connect with her if you wanted to feature her in 1 episode or 2 episodes. So that would be something that came to my mind. And I also happen to know 2 wonderful students at my university who are Ukraine. One of them is currently teaching in special education program in Simon Fraser University in Canada. And I would be glad to try to connect with them if you need to feature a Ukrainian educator. Thanks.
Thank you. Who wants to jump in next on that? Don't be shy.
Can I jump in? Because I raised my hand. Anyway, yes, I think having a presence on LinkedIn will be something very, very good. And we can also try to, or Silver Learning for Learning, can try to have the, to broadcast the show, the episode through LinkedIn. That would be great. So to have the presence on LinkedIn, okay, have followers, but also what we're doing, what Silver Learning for Learning does every Saturday afternoon, that can also be done on LinkedIn and live. It will be easy to follow as well than going on YouTube, for instance. We can have YouTube, can also have LinkedIn. Okay, those are my first ideas about platform. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob, you've unmuted, Bob. Do you have a suggestion?
But if you're looking for a theme for next year, because I'm old, I've learned that sustained change depends on strong relationships. And so if somehow or another you're able to feature successful partnerships and how to build those partnerships during this next year, that might be very helpful.
Thanks. Good idea.
Yeah, so just speaking to your comment.
John has raised his hand.
Sorry, go ahead.
So, it's okay. Just thought you're talking about media. Your biggest competition for me is a kind of a chat show on Irish television where we have a comedian who does interviews, but the twist is he doesn't know who the guest is before he comes on. So some of the guests are international names, like they had Roger Daltrey of The Who, but they've had some unique people, like they had a mortician, of the youngest female mortician in Ireland. So basically, you just have random people come in, and because they don't have books to sell or anything to do, they're just in there to do an interview, and he doesn't know who they are. He's actually a great interviewer because he asks great questions because he doesn't know who people are. And I'm thinking one of the four of you guys would make a great guest. And I just need to figure out who the booker is and just kind of flag. And if you're in Ireland to do it, it'd be just fantastic. It's just that the conversation, if you kind of follow Saturday Night Twitter in Ireland, it's the most talked about thing is about the guest, because he asks questions of people that he has to think about on the spot. And the questions he asks have been really amazing. Like the questions I'll send you guys some links next week, whatever, on some of the episodes where he's kind of been able to get people to talk about stuff that they haven't talked about, kind of family death and mental health, where people that would be amazing stars. And because he doesn't know and it's not prepared, he's asking some great questions and some crappy questions, but there's a great story here, guys. And I think you'd have to fight amongst yourselves to who'd be on it. But if you could get somebody, if I could find out who the booker is or who's in charge and doing it, I said there's four guys here who have great conversations to talk about, and that'd be an interesting media slant on publicity and getting a wider audience, because it's probably the most popular TV show in Ireland at the moment, and it started with the lockdown, and it's just a fantastic, because and actually I had a former student who's an actress now, and there's one night I was watching you guys, and then Claire came on and says, "Bye lads," after spoke my former student. But yeah, it's just, I do think there's a great story that could be told, and you've all got great stories as well outside of that. So if I see you get an email from me in the next couple of weeks saying, "Come to Ireland, we have a TV gig for you," you know what it's about.
All right. Thank you, John, for that. Any other suggestions, thoughts?
Priyank and Lydia, Punya.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly jump in here. I think when we're discussing media, I think, the larger question rather I would like to ask is, what is, the vision of SLL here? Because I remember in one of our YouTube sessions in chats, we were discussing that, people are writing academic research papers, they get published in international journals, but how many people actually read it? And then one of the hosts had told that they actually write blogs so that it gives more access to people. So when we are discussing all of these things, particularly to SLL, what is the vision? Like, you want people to actually see it. What kind of audience you want to really reach to? Is it when I think we're doing great, but in terms of what to host thing in terms of the larger vision, I think if that has a lot of I don't know how to put it in a better way, but if it is more clear, maybe we can target the audience that way.
Thank you, Priyank. Lydia?
Yeah, building on that, I'm wondering whether we can have like a condensed version of the 1 hour, just like a couple of highlights that we can easily circulate, that's easily to watch from Twitter or Facebook, and then that might insensitize people to click and watch the full show.
Thank you. All great ideas. And in fact, we have talked about a bunch of these, but you should understand, at this point in time, it is the four of us with whatever, I, maintain the website. I do the editing of the video. So my Saturday is 1 hour of this and 1 hour of taking care of the back end of stuff. And then I don't do as much with soliciting the guests, but Zhao and Chris and Kurt in particular, who seems to pretty much know everybody, solicits guests for us. So it is a very stripped down operation, to be honest. And I think I would love to follow up on Priyank's question and see what my co-hosts think of that. What is our vision for this? I mean, we started this honestly on a whim, which is why episode 100 seems so amazing. But I honestly think that this is something that the fact that we have committed this time to it means that it is meaningful to us. That you guys have been watching means it's meaningful to you as well. And we would love to expand this, but I'd love to hear what you guys think would be sort of SLL going forward, or from Zhao and Chris and Kurt as well.
Yeah, I know Gerald raised his hand. Gerald, I recognize. I always know your hands is up. But anyway, so we'll get back to you. I was just very touched by what everybody was saying, and I just want to share with you some of my thoughts about this episodes. First of all, we're professors. We're pretty bad at promoting anything. People pay to come to sit in our classroom to say, hey, go watch that. So we are not really good at any of this promotion, and we did not really have time to do that. I was also joking about this. I said, if it's something good, people should come. It's apparently wrong. Apparently, I'm so wrong. It's just no matter how good you are, people don't come. So that's really an interesting way to think about it. And the second thing I think I was just reflect on is, honestly, as 4 professors like Chris Didi, Kurt Bunk, Punya Mishra, Yong Zhao, if we were teaching a course, we would have more students than people who are watching us live, right? So otherwise we wouldn't be teaching, So it's really a fascinating way to think about how what we've organized could really be course materials really for many webinars or seminars in many universities, because these are really challenging, tough things, we're dealing with. I think the third point is that we must admit this. We have really invited so many people. I have never run into anyone who said no when I invite them. And they know we have a very tiny audience, but they are happy to jump in. We are really some very well-known, very well-established people. Nobody asked us to pay them. Even if they did ask, we said no, but they still joined us. It's just really shocking. So somehow I would say we do have attraction to a lot of people. But the challenge is to say, why don't people listen to us? I think John's suggestion might be good. We should go to Ireland to get everyone from Ireland to watch us. But that's, but another thing, actually, like today, ironically, we got audience from almost every little place, right? We got England, we got Ireland, we got India, we got China. It's just really interesting to watch this. So I'm not exactly knowing what I'm talking about, but I think if any of you could bring others in to help us to do something with the materials, to do post-processing, like Punya was suggesting, that would be wonderful. If we could build a community of people who are interested in innovation and do something about that, that would be something nice, like a social movement. I'm always interested in social movement. The 4 of us cannot make a social movement, but we get 5, 6, 7 people, that might work. Thank you.
Gerald, you've had your hand up. Sorry, I missed that.
Not a problem at all. It's a virtual hand, so I'm not tired. I'll be really, really fast. One of the questions was, what are you interested in looking forward? I'm going to pick up on Robert's theme, looking around change, sustaining systemic change, cognizant of equity, and how do we do that, and where are some good examples of that, and connecting the big picture to the local context. There's a lot of big picture things happening and that are presented on the show. How do we link that? How do we put that in the local context? Stealing, and it's going to sound really, really reductionist to say it, and I'm stealing a bit from Fahrenheit 451. But if there was a way to pull some of the composite themes, I mean, you're talking about 100 episodes, right? At an hour each, that's a lot of really good content. And we're constantly competing for people's time. I know there was a quip about getting a grant to be able to go to Ireland, but are there grants available where someone could go through and take a lot of the content, a lot of the repeated themes, things that came out, and somehow package them into a digestible format for a broader audience? And yeah, drawing elements from the series, picking up again on what was said. What is the target market? Is there a way to, translating the research into practice? I know Scott did a focus group a while back, and he was able to turn that into a research piece that had some ideas and some suggestions. So you've got a wealth of content here. How do you mind it? Recognizing that you guys are all doing it off the side of your desks, but also recognizing you have grad students too. So,
Thank you, Gerald. And I'm just looking at the time. I didn't realize it's 3:25 already. So the hours just flew by. So before I give any final comments, anything from my hosts, co-hosts want to say something, or any of the guests want to make a final comment before I close out the episode?
Well, I'll just throw out two words to ponder. One of them is a term called bricolage, which means building something completely new from small parts that have played a role. And I think that this program is to some extent about bricolage. The other is kintsugi, which is a Japanese term about taking something that's unfortunately been broken and making something even better and more beautiful out of it. And I think the year 3 may need to be the year of bricolage and of kintsugi.
You know, one thing I've always wondered, sorry about that, is how many episodes will run. I think at least 1,000 episodes. So Lydia, you could write 2 dissertations, 3 dissertations, you know, for your peer. But I think that we've been thinking a lot about the next 100 episodes. You know, we've been featuring a lot of innovations during the pandemic. I think now, as Chris was talking about, we need to really push for innovations on a larger scale. And COVID might come, COVID might be gone, but natural disasters happen, human disasters happen a lot. I think the world is now in a very difficult time. When I'm meeting with students, it's very tough. So how do we push for better education? As I said before, how do we educate our children to create a better future for themselves and a better retirement for us? That's the key. Thank you.
So I'll add to that. John gave me an idea. I'm going to book a few shows, fake shows, and I'm going to bring 3 or 4 people in anonymous and have my co-hosts guess who they are. They're just going to show up. They're not going to know. I'm going to post fake bios, and they'll think they have someone, and I'll bring totally different people in. We'll see if that brings an audience or not, or if I get thrown out of this show. People throw tomatoes. Punya.
Yes, sir. Just final comments. Again, thank you, all of you, for having been part of this journey with us. Can't believe it's 2 years. You know, if it was a baby who's now a toddler and has started speaking. So I think to add to, I thank you, Chris, for those 2 words, bricolage and kintsugi, because I think that we are at the point where we have built a significant amount of content, and really there's an opportunity to then expand our audience, to expand the topics. I love this, Gerald, what you suggested about, and Bob, is this idea of like this systemic change, and that how can we build, and that cannot happen without partnership. So would love to get some episodes. I think we have had a few, particularly when we had, you know, the dean from ASU and the work around the next education workforce, which is really working in partnership with our College of Education and New Models for Learning. If you haven't seen that episode, I really recommend that. But again, thank you very much. Just a couple of new things. We're going to have a new and improved intro and outro to our video starting today. So, and a slightly new visual design for those images to make them a little bit more consistent over time, because, you know, it's whimsically done. And we are in some conversations with to see if we can get some support to do this work. One thing that I would suggest, if you guys are up to it, those who are active on social media, on Twitter and so on, is to tweet previous episodes. There are episodes which are I don't want to say timeless, but are still valuable because of the topics, and we just don't have the bandwidth. What we tend to do is, okay, next episode coming up. But if you find an episode, older one, that you think is valuable, tweet it out. That's one thing we don't do, which is there is a wealth of material out there which is not being shared unless somebody finds it. So we are not actively doing that. So that would be wonderful. For next week, we are trying to reach out to some of the guests who have been on our show in previous episodes over the past 2 years to seek their reflections and think about what the next 100 episodes can and should be. We look forward to seeing you online, and wonderful to put faces to names. It has been very meaningful, personally speaking, this entire process, and I thank you for that.